Take your Bibles and go to Isaiah 45. Isaiah 45. Isaiah 45. As you turn over there, we're going to finish up one of the part 2 on some stuff on the principles. So we'll finish that tonight. But obviously, there's a few families that are out of town, and then we've got several families that still have that sickness stuff, going around. I think, this is my opinion, about 5 years ago, remember all that craziness? Remember all that? And they told you, shut everything down, don't go anywhere, don't get within 6 feet, go different lanes inside the grocery store, you could only go one way. Remember all that crazy stuff? And our country was pretty much shut down for about a year and a half, 2 years. And you couldn't get near anybody, didn't shake hands, you did fist bumps and did a wave, and then they were scared to come back to church. All that stuff affects a group of people in a nation, any nation. Remember they talked about herd immunity. Remember that? They used to have chicken pox parties. Remember that? They'd take their kids and expose them to other kids just to go ahead and get rid of it. When you shut a country down or a bunch of people and just tell them not to get around each other, sickness is something you're not going to get rid of, but you do build up immunities to it. And I kind of wonder if that's not what we're experiencing right now. It used to be, I had never experienced that before in churches, where the whole church would get sick at one time. It used to be, you have a few people got sick, but now it's like when it goes around, everybody gets it. And I'm just kind of wondering if our immunity is not built up to that stuff yet, thanks to government lockdowns. So anyway, just some food for thought. Has nothing to do with the message, okay? Isaiah 45. We've already read the verse. Let me just recap just briefly with you. Verse 9. Woe unto him that striveth with his maker. God said, warning, don't argue with God. Don't we say that God is always right? Sometimes the problem is just accepting his rightness because we view the rightness as being wrong, right? But he is right. He said, let the potsherds strive with the potsherds of the earth. In other words, let you peons argue with each other, but don't argue with your God. Because what your God does is nothing gets by him without his acknowledgement or his approval, okay? And he said, let the potsherds strive with the potsherds of the earth. Shall the clay say to him that fashioneth? So should the clay argue with the potter? Well, it wouldn't make much sense. The potter is the one that's forming everything, and he's doing it. And so from that principle, in verse 9, right there, we said there's some principles in the Scriptures of some things that you cannot change in life. And if you don't accept them for what they are, then you're going to be battling those things the rest of your days. And it'll affect all sorts of areas of your life. And what we led up to was it'll even affect the areas of your finances. But it's not just your finances it affects. It'll affect relationships, all sorts of things in jobs, children, church situations. It just affects everything. Number one, we said, was parents. You can't change your parents. That's who they are. Some folks go through life and say, well, I wish I had different parents. You can't change that. You can't change it. And even the subject we dealt with, even with adoption, there's individuals in that Bible that are adopted, and that's who God put them with. And you better get the place you can accept that. Then we said time and history. Somebody says, well, I just wish I would have been born little house on the prairie. You'd be dying with no AC. Yeah. And when they said horsepower, they didn't mean your truck out there. Yeah. It's always fun to reminisce and look back, and some folks get tied up in things and saying, well, I like the good old days. Well, you don't live in the good old days anymore. God's got you right here in 2025. And Mordecai looks at Esther and says, for such a time as this. And that's a principle you can't change. You can't change it. Racial background. There's folks that would like to be a different color. Now, for some of us, that's crazy. But our government sometimes and politics has fed that stuff and made you feel guilty for whatever race you are and the other to feel bad because what they're. You didn't have a choice with that. You didn't have a choice with it. And so whatever it is that you wind up color skin and the race lineage, that's what it is. And then we said national heritage. Now, I don't know if any of us sat here tonight and said, man, I sure do wish I'd been born in, Afghanistan. I don't. I'm thankful I was born in America, okay? But I don't fault a guy born in Afghanistan, Ethiopia, or another third world country, and he just loves his country. He ought to love his country. I love America, but it's got a lot of faults. So I'm not foolish to think just because my love that it makes it all right and correct with God. It's not. I wish there'd be a lot of things that would be changed, but I'm thankful for the nation that God put me in. So national heritage, you can't change that. You can't change it. You could. How many have seen some of these Hollywood stars that said, if he becomes president, I'm moving? And some of them did. Have you watched their stories? It's not going too well for them. And you can't change it. Look in your Bibles at Genesis chapter 1. Here's our fifth one tonight. And so, Lord willing, there's 10 of them. We're going to hopefully finish out these this evening. And I hope you'll see that if these areas of these 10 principles can be applied in so many ways, this will help your life when it comes to raising children, living for the Lord where He has you. You can't, some of these things, because you can't change them, what you'll begin to see, and immediately in this next one right here, is what we're faced with in our society today. Because you can't change it, individuals will spend thousands and thousands of dollars to try to change this. And then they're still not happy. And all you got to do is just accept the way that God made you. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him, male and female. So when He talks about in verse 26, He creates man, that's a gender, right? But it's that verse 26, when He says man, that's woman and man. He distinguishes it in verse 27 and says He makes, in the image of God created He him, male and female created He them. So gender is from God. God's the one that instituted it. But you'd be amazed, and I'm going to be careful with what I say tonight, obviously. But you adults understand what's going on in our country, from drugs that alter all sorts of chemicals within the body, surgeries. The Bible addresses these things. Over there in Deuteronomy, chapter 22 and verse 5, there He warned that a man was not to dress like a woman, and a woman was not to dress like a man. And I'm sorry to burst the Independent Baptist bubble, but it's not talking about women wearing pants. That's not the context of that passage. It's what used to be called cross-dressing. Now it's normalized and called trans. And that whole industry, that whole area, you used to look at it in a society and say that's a mental illness is what that is. But not anymore. Not anymore. Now corporations placate to it and open up bathrooms to anybody, sports to anyone. And you can't help but look at them and say, I pity you. You cannot even accept the basic of what God created you as. That passage said that God created male and female in His own image. Now we know that the image obviously has to do with the body, the soul, and the spirit, meaning that it's like a fingerprint of God, that God in His creation left a fingerprint that left proof that there was a God. Because the man and the woman, those two do not look alike. And every man doesn't look alike, and every woman doesn't look alike. So the image cannot be physical necessarily. But obviously the physical does play a part. It's how you distinguish the two. Look at Nahum chapter 3. Nahum chapter 3. Not usually a common book that you would look at on the subject of gender. Nahum chapter 3. Nahum chapter 3. I was watching a news interview just yesterday of, what was it, the National, it wasn't NEA, National Education Association, but it was some kind of, union about the educators, and they're interviewing this lady, and she's justifying all the books that they've allowed in the schools. And the newscaster read out of a book that was read publicly in public schools at the age of 5 and 6. Appalling. Appalling. See, what are they up to? They want to change the thinking of some kids. And God said, just accept the way I made you. And if you can't accept that, watch, it'll affect your finances. Your whole drive would be towards that area, wouldn't it? So again, all of these areas are just principles that you can't change. If you must accept it. Nahum chapter 3. And Nahum chapter 3, look at verse 13. He said, behold, thy people in the midst of thee are women. Well, that's rude. Now listen, God loves men and he loves women. What he's doing in this passage is he's looking at a group of men that should have been leaders, and he said, you're like a bunch of women. Even God looks at it and says there should be a distinction between men and women. This is not a fault against women. This is a fault against the men. Let me show you another one. Look at Jeremiah chapter 51. Jeremiah 51. Jeremiah 51. Jeremiah chapter 51. Our society says, well, you can change. Well, you can't change. Then they say, well, they're all the same. They're not the same. God distinctly made them different. Jeremiah chapter 51. And you remember Jeremiah's preaching at Israel. Israel is in rebellion against God. Jeremiah 51 verse 30. The mighty men of Babylon have forborne to fight. They have remained in their holds. Their might hath failed. They became as what? Women. He looked at a group of men of Babylon, and God says, they became like women. Well, generally, the man's the one that fights. He's the soldier. That's your image that you get in the Bible. He's the man that goes into another country, and he fights for them. That's what happened in World War II. Our ladies in this country went to the factories to keep the guys on the field. And now all of a sudden things have changed. So he says, in this passage, he said, a society is in trouble when the men have become as women. So there are distinctions. Masculinity, at its deepest core, is immortal. It is everlasting because it's a fingerprint of God. Just as on the flip side, the femininity of a woman is the fingerprint of God. God refers to himself as Father. That's his general gender, right, that you give in the Scriptures. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But there's a couple places in that Bible that he describes himself as loving you as a nurse cherisheth her children. That's a feminine characteristic. So at its heart, even both core genders are an imprint of God's being and who he is. The height of this non-acceptance is really just a spiritual attack on our nation and an attack on your book that God wrote for you. I was thinking a little bit more about the gender thing. And man, and I've taught some of this, some of you are familiar with it. Man has three core desires, meaning the man, not the woman, the man. His three core desires, his most inner deepness, right, is a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and then a beauty to love. That beauty to love, it shows you the passionate side of a man. That's the Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. Isn't that passionate? That's something there's a sweetness that goes along with that psalm. And that was written by David. And yet he was a man that could fight, and he could battle, and yet he was a man that could write poetry. He could write poems. We usually think that's girlish, right? But you know, a lot of those songs, those hymns that you've got right there, they weren't written as songs to begin with, some of those. They were written as poetry. And then somebody along the line says, let's put some music to that thing. And they became known as hymns and songs that we sing. So a battle to fight, an adventure to live, a beauty to love. That's the core passions of any man. You can put him in a dress, And guess what didn't change? His core passions. That's the way he was made. This is why boys like to play in the dirt. They do. I can't tell you how many times my wife has said, they're filthy. I just don't understand this. Look how dirty they are. And what do they, I mean, it doesn't bother them one bit to walk outside and just like mud puddle, just like a magnet, buddy, right into it. And then I got all them nieces, and I'm not saying they never got dirty, but and playing around. But now some of them are getting the age where they just kind of watch the boys, and they're like, ugh. But see, that man was created from the dirt. She wasn't made from the dirt. She was made from him. And that man wants to know is there something worth fighting for? You take watch this. Have you ever seen an older man and they take his keys away and he can no longer drive? He's done. You know what it is? There's no more adventures. Nothing to fight for. Now, I'm not saying give the keys back. But it's the core issue. It's just what it is. This is why that boy, I mean little one, likes capes, superhero stuff, can take a stick and make a sword or make a spear. If he doesn't even have that, he can take his hands and make gun noises. He's the same one that loves bandanas and camouflage and guns. Now, every once in a while, you're going to find somebody that goes, yeah, but my little girl, yeah, and she's an exception to the rule. Because the general rule is, that's the boys. And what were you? He was created in God's image. Look at Exodus 15. Exodus 15. Listen, I'm telling you that this book is far beyond science and this world out there that says they got it all figured out, and the professor says and you think, well, I can't argue that. Well, listen, all they do is you and I can use dime store Bible words, and they got bigger words they use. And I don't care about their words. Did you know that that's what intrigued the common man about Jesus Christ? The Bible says the common man heard him gladly. Why? Because he didn't talk, dear brethren, we are here not tonight together. And you ever heard religious services, you've seen all that stuff on news right now. That's a bunch of garbage. God's not one bit impressed with that. God's interested in a bunch of nobodies that said we'd like to learn his book. And you know what he'll do? He'll show you the way he thinks and what he does, and they ain't got a clue. Look at Exodus 15. Look at this about God, what he says about himself. Exodus 15, verse 3. The Lord is a man of war. That's his characteristic, isn't it? That's why you didn't have to teach that boy how to fight. They're just good at it. You didn't have to teach him, say, now, boys, you need to look for adventure in life. No, boys, I don't see either sister here, so I get to tell all sorts of stories. Some of you heard this one, but some of this is new. Me and my cousin, now we had this pesky little cousin. He was younger, and we just did, so we left him inside, and we had BB guns. And we were allowed to go out back at Papa's house, and we were allowed to shoot our BB guns, but it got real boring real quick when it was just like cans or targets that just sat there. We wanted something moving. You got to have something moving. I mean, isn't that what everybody shoots at? So we came up with a plan, and it was a really good one. It really was. We had found in Papa's shed one of those foam blocks, and I don't know what it came from, but man, it was perfect. And then we found some string. I'm sure that string was at least 1,000 feet long. Had to be. It really wasn't. But that's what it seemed like as kids. Now, it probably was only about 5 feet long, but I don't know. To us, it seemed like really a long distance. And so all I had to do was we schemed it. We said, we'll take Erin, my sister, and that was his cousin. We'll take her. She's going to run across the garden with the string, and we're going to shoot the styrofoam. That's all we were going to do, is shoot the styrofoam. And we got about 2 shots off. She was running. All right, go. And she was willing. She was little. She takes off running, and we shoot the styrofoam. And then my cousin, he says, I want to shoot. No, because you don't know how to shoot right. We know how to shoot right. And so then the little pest runs inside and tells my mom and his mom. and ants come running out. You know what I'm saying? And some reason they were like, we got grounded. We had the guns taken away from us. I don't know what all happened, but they ruined the whole thing. It was a perfect plan. It was. You know what we were looking for? Adventure. Adventure. This is why they can cut something down and climb it. This is why they can build something. Listen, what I'm showing you is the character of what God imprinted inside a man. And that didn't change when he was a toddler. And so when he became a man, whatever the age, that's why the guy walks up to you and goes, come here, let me show you what I made. He wants you to see what he made. Because he made something. Now, listen, ladies, y'all don't do that. You don't come walk in the church going, here, quick, let me show you what I painted this week. But that's why I'm going to go, come look at the car. And they all look over the hood of it, you know. It's just in our nature. I'm not saying be prideful or arrogant. I don't mean that. We're looking for something, a battle to fight. Is it worth fighting? Is it a venture to live? And is there a beauty, something beautiful to love? Now, I'll mention this, okay, guys. Remember the first time that you saw that girl in junior high, high school, and you thought, whoa. Now, ladies, you're like, oh, but this is a guy. I didn't say it was lustful, but it was just the first time they caught our attention. Like, wow. And she's the fair maiden. And if she's in danger, you know what she wants? She wants to know that she's worth dying for. And so you're looking for something that's worth dying for. Something worth loving. Now that little girl, she's interested in tea parties and playing wedding and playing house, playing mama, and taking that dress and that dress up with all them high heels and spinning around in front of daddy and getting his attention. Why? Well, she wants to know that she's beautiful. She wants to know that she is delighted in. And ladies, that didn't change as you got older. You still want to know, does he like me? And she's not here, but I can say it. I'll say, you're beautiful. Oh, no, I'm not. And I'll say it again. Oh, no, I'm not. Why? Because that's what you're wanting to know. You know what happened in the garden? We studied on this on Monday night. Eve takes that grape, hands it over to him. That was the fruit. It was the fruit of the vine. She hands it over to him. And he died. Well, he died because he wasn't deceived. She was deceived. But here's my guess. When I read that passage in Genesis 3, I think that Adam was right there, right beside her, when the serpent said, take it. And he didn't die for her. He didn't stand up and fight for her. And the moment I say that, there's somebody here, especially a lady or an older lady, and your mind traces you all the way back to something that daddy didn't stand up for you, an ex-husband didn't stand up for you, or a brother didn't stand up for you, or a husband didn't stand up for you. And you've never forgotten it. It's at your core. She wants to know that she will be pursued after. Are you willing to go to the ends of the world for me? And she wants an adventure. Now, here's a problem. If the guy looks at the woman and decides he's going to make her an adventure, in other words, an adventure to get her, that's not what she wants. She wants to go somewhere too. She wants a togetherness. And guys, if we're not careful, we leave her behind. You say, well, preacher, I hadn't gone anywhere. Well, that's your problem. You got no adventure to fight for, and you haven't included her. She wants to know at her core, this is how God made us. Why are we nervous with this stuff? Now, if those are the three core issues at the heart of a man and the heart of a woman, and some fool, mentally deranged, thinks by changing their clothes and going through all the things of society and, quote, science, that they can change that, you will not change that. And if you are created to be that, then that is the clay that is arguing with the potter, saying, I think I'll be happier on the other side. You ever heard that saying, it's always greener on the other side of the fence? I'll tell you it's why it's greener on the other side of the fence. That's where the septic tank is at. That's why it's greener. You ever walked in that green grass and something went, and you went, oh no. Yeah. You thought if you just got that one thing, you'd be happy. And you got the thing, and you weren't happy. What you got to accept. God made me as a male. God made me as a female. This is the way He designed me. Who would have ever thought that we would even have to have that conversation? How many of you in this room, if I gone back 50, 60 years ago and said, this is going to be a problem of individuals wanting to change gender, you would have laughed at me. You said, there is no way. That's insanity. And here we are. So guys, she's not the adventure. She wants to be a part of it. And guys, as far as her, you'll kill her heart if you look at her and tell her to shut up and sit down, or tell her to be tough. They're not supposed to be tough. You're supposed to be tough. If you tell her to go out in that workforce and just be efficient, that's a man that's supposed to be efficient. Why have we taken, here's what we did, we don't necessarily say it, but we take a standard and we place it upon ladies and we place it upon men. We do it to society of men where we effeminize them. You understand what I mean by that? We've weakened manhood. Now we just give them a bell curve. They don't have to fight for anything. How many of you guys, as far as raising boys, you ever looked at your boys and say, you can do it, come on. Well, I can't do it. Come on, you can do it. Well, I can't. Yes, you can. You can do it. And then they tried it and they did it. You know what you're doing? You're encouraging something to strive for. Figure out how to do it. Well, you took it apart, put it back together. Anybody can take something apart. There's been many a weed eaters and lawnmowers and power equipment in my house, and the screws are strode from here to the street. You know what they're trying to find an adventure. How to do something. When you look at a lady and tell her, even by not by your words, but even by your actions, say, be independent, be on your own. That's not the way God made her. That's not the way God made her. Now again, a lot of these areas, you can't necessarily change your circumstances, but what I'm showing you is there's some principles that you can't change. I don't think anybody here is sitting here tonight going, man, I wish I was the other gender. I don't think that's the case, but again, that's what's being rammed down the throats of Americans. And you better have a Bible answer to say, no, that's not right. Or as grandparents, and I know some of you in these situations, or you've got individuals that are in that system out there, and they're going to hear it. And you can be the one to say, God made you this way. This is why you're made this way. This is why you think this way. And back it up. Back it up with the Word of God. Go to Luke chapter 15. Let me go to number 6. So you can't change man or woman. Again, I know they try, but sadly I've seen some of those articles and interviews of individuals that went through those transitions and detransitioning, and they say they were miserable and suicidal. Duh, yeah. A few of the ones I've seen, they have come to Christ. So that was pretty neat to hear them talk about that. Luke chapter 15. Number 6 is that something you cannot change is your birth order. You say, I wish I'd been the firstborn. I wish I'd been the baby of the family. You can't change that. Somebody might say, well, I was only child. You can't change that. You can't change in what order you were born. That firstborn, as we all know, every firstborn is always smarter. I'm firstborn, so I can say that. No, that's not true, is it? No, it's not true. But you ever heard somebody say, well, they're the firstborn, they never got in trouble? Probably not true either. That firstborn in the Bible, look at Luke chapter 15, verse 29. Here's a firstborn. This is that parable of the prodigal son. Remember the story? Verse 29. And he answering, he said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee. Neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. In other words, a kid was a goat that sacrificed for the younger brother, the prodigal son that came back. Now there's generally, these are characteristics to note, generally there's some, they're not steadfast rules, but they're just some characteristics of a birth order. Usually a firstborn will respond or reject authority more than any of the other birth order lineup. Either they're going to just right at it, and they're not going to sway. This is just the way they are. And they're not going to rebel against authority or against the parents, against individuals, or they'll swing it. And when they swing it the other way, it's all or none. Generally, that's a general rule. That older brother, he's basically saying, this is what I lived right, and you didn't do that for me. I followed everything you asked. The older firstborn usually has a greater responsibility compared to these siblings. You ever notice that in families? You say, whether you like it or not, it's what it is. And I've seen it where they've got about 12, 13 kids, and the oldest one, I've seen some of those kids say, when I get old enough or I get married, I'm not having this many kids. Why? Because responsibilities were put on them as if that child was a mother or a father. And generally, they're more responsive to authority and even kind of shy away from rebellion. It's a general rule. Secondborn. Secondborn generally, characteristic, needs greater acceptance. Generally needs a greater approval. Here you go. They just need a little more attention. That's the secondborn. They usually are a little bit more competitive. I can see that in my secondborn. You watch him out there. But he gets in them games, and that competitive comes out. We have to go, Joshua, back it off a little bit, buddy. Generally, they will try harder at things, put a little more effort in something. They're more trusting. And they're usually more loyal. And possibly even on the edge of being gullible about believing anything. The prodigal son, we would assume he's a secondborn. And if he's the secondborn in that story, he was gullible. He was so gullible to think that all of his friends were interested in him. And he was somebody. Remember this? He spends all the money, and where'd the friends go? Well, they weren't really friends, but he believed them. And he believed that was the best route to go, and he felt unaccepted. That's generally a secondborn. Thirdborn. Thirdborn is usually more independent, usually more sociable, usually friends with everybody. They're usually the friendliest, usually of all, and usually more influenced by the older siblings. Again, these are just general characteristics. And what's funny is when I read these things, there's always people in the crowd that go, yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can kind of see it. It's interesting to see those things that take place. You can't change your birth order. You can't sit back and say, I wish I'd had siblings. Well, you didn't. You were in charge of that. Well, I wish I'd been the firstborn. No, you're the secondborn. You believe everything. Well, I wish I'd been the thirdborn, and then I'd have lots of friends. Well, you're not. You're the secondborn, and we love you more. And I'm saying this. My dad would years ago when Summer, she was the middle, and I can remember him looking at her and saying, and I'm not faulting her. This is just the general stuff that goes along with this. He'd say, he said, "What's the best part of a ham sandwich?" He says, "The ham in the middle." He said, "What's the best part of an Oreo?" The filling. You know what he was doing? He was reiterating that position in a lineup was just as important. She's not me, I'm not her, and she's not Aaron. It was not a perfect family. What I'm saying is that you as a parent, you've got to recognize this stuff. If you can recognize it, then you know where their strengths and their weaknesses are within those kids. And if it's you better accept the fact you can't change it. You can't change it. Those grandchildren, okay, parents aren't teaching them. You can. You can. Number 7 flows right in off of the siblings of the lineup or birth order. Number 7 is brothers and sisters. You can get mad at them and say, I'll never talk to them again, but they are still your brother or they're still your sister. Well, no, there's no well. Now, I didn't say that you have to put up with certain stupidity, but you can't change that. You can't change it. It's the family that God put you in. Number 8 is probably where it gets a little more nitty-gritty for us, and that's physical features. You can look in the mirror. Every one of us can look in a mirror, and if you were totally honest with me, and I said, is there something in that mirror that you can see that you would change? Hey, sir, don't bow up on me. Say, oh, not me. Oh, there'd be something that you look at that mirror and say, I'd change that right there. That's why you don't look perfect. But did you know that everybody in this room looks in a mirror and says, if I could change something, this is what I'd change? There's some things about me I can't change. Stop. No comments, please. Okay. Thank you. It's physical features. You have to come to the place that this is the way that God made me. This is the way God made me. Even the individual that you look at and think, well, they've got everything perfect and they're all the perfect image, they still want something changed. Look at those Hollywood stars. Look at them. Look at the money. There's no telling how much money they have spent on all their surgeries. I remember there was every time we went to family reunion, we didn't go every year, but a few times we went as a kid, there was always this one aunt that her skin looked perfect. And years later, I realized I kind of heard through the grapevine that she had, like, what they call those. And so by the time she got older, it was just like, the whole thing was just stretched back. She had no wrinkles. Now, somebody had to pay that doctor. You know, it'd be a lot cheaper on your pocketbook is to say, this is what God made. And if I could change it, yeah, I'd change it in the sense of, like, I don't like it that way, but God saw for a reason. There's a man in the Bible like that. Look at Exodus chapter 4. Exodus chapter 4. And now, I'm not talking about bad character, right, okay? If you're burping in front of company, stop it, okay? And don't say, well, that's just the way that God made me. No, you can control that, right, okay? So I'm not talking about bad behavior, bad manners. Those things need to stop, okay? But there's some things in your life and about your person that you just can't change. Exodus chapter 4, Exodus 4, verse 10. And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. You see, what's he saying? He probably had a speech impediment. That's probably what he had. Couldn't get his words out. You ever heard somebody stutters? Can't talk smooth. That's Moses. And God comes to Moses and says, Moses, you're going to go up to Pharaoh and you're going to tell him, let my people go. And Moses says, I get nervous. That's probably what he sounded like. And God says, no, I called you. And he says, but I've always been like this. God says, I know. Now, something changes with Moses. Because his argument is, I can't do that. And all of a sudden he goes, yeah, I can. But he says, I'll tell you what we'll do. He says, God, would you give me a spokesman? He goes, fine. Use your brother Aaron. He says, so just tell Aaron what you want to say to Pharaoh. And then Aaron will tell him. Remember the story? And so here he goes into Pharaoh, and I guess probably what's happened, he's probably more familiar with Aaron, and he can communicate better. He doesn't get nervous. He tells Aaron, now when we go in there, he said, now the rule today is we're going to tell him about frogs. We're going to talk about frogs. And you're going to tell him about all them frogs he's going to have coming his way. And if he doesn't let our people go, frogs are coming at him. You got it? Got it. He said, okay. And as he go in there, you ought to read the story. Now remember, that's why Aaron went with him. He's the spokesman. And as they walk in, Moses raises his hand, and about that time, Aaron gets ready to go. And before he can even get, thus saith the Lord out, Moses goes, and by the way, you better let our people go. And I can just see Aaron going, I thought I was going to get to talk today. He goes, oh, sorry. You get to do it the next day. And every time Moses talks. Now, I don't know that he necessarily had to go, okay, I need to accept the principle that God has made me this way. But something changed. And Moses did all the talking. I think it's a really neat picture that you and I both need to accept the way that God made you. That'd save you a lot of money, a lot of time and worry. And I've told you, when folks look at a photograph picture, they do not look at you to judge the picture. They look at themselves. It's a group picture. And they'll look at that group picture and they say, oh, it's a terrible picture. And you look at it and you go, that's a terrible picture. You know what they're looking at? Them. And you're looking at you. They never saw you. How many times you heard somebody go, I had my eyes closed. And I went, I didn't see it. You know why? Because I looked at me. We're selfish by nature. But you're real worried about you. If you just accept the way God made you, you can't change it. It's a principle. Number 9, we're on downhill slope. We're about finished here. Number 9 is mental ability. You ever wish you were smarter? Man, I wish I could read a book and remember it. I get jealous of some of those folks that can like speed read through a book and then you say, what's it about? And they just rattle off everything it was about. I'm like, man, I have to highlight it. I was looking at a book today and I went, oh, I didn't know I'd read that book. At first I thought, well, maybe that's not my highlight. And then I got over to the next page and I was like, oh, that's my handwriting. I have read that one. I don't even remember it. Man, I wish I was smarter. This is what you get. There's some folks that are just brains, aren't they? And there's some that are dumb as rocks. Brother, right? I mean, some just, they don't get it. I wish I could tell you stories, but I can't do it. I just can't. But there's some that they're like that, and you have to remind myself, this is the way God made them. And you have to go over and over again and tell them. Is there people like that? There's people like that. Paul said, comfort the feeble-minded. And then there's those folks that just, what is it? Mental IQ. Your brain's like a computer. It takes in information. Correct? It takes in memories and retains it. You understand there is a limit, there is a capacity. At some point it goes, done. It's like one of them LED chargers and it goes, full. That's it. So you think your wisdom is infinite? You think your brain knowledge is infinite? You can just keep piling it on and on and on? I don't think so. At some point it kind of maxes out. That's what it is. Now if that's the case, maybe that might have you reconsider what you put in your brain. Some of you put in a lot of stuff that's meaningless. Will not help you in life. How many of you guys, you don't have to answer it completely, how many of you guys memorized or learned facts about sports or video games and computers, something that was just worthless? And you look back now going, man, I just wasted my time with all that stuff years ago. You know what you occupied? Brain power. Some of you filled your brains with music and lyrics. You say, well, I don't listen to that anymore. I know you don't. But the moment you hear it in the store, all the words come back. You know what you did? You processed it and you put it in there. That's why it's vitally important to take our young kids and have them memorize Scripture when they're little. Try to get some of these adults to memorize John 3:16. It'd take them 3 months to figure out how to get half the verse. Because it's just harder. And that kid can remember stuff. Your mental ability. You can't change it, but you could monitor what you put in. Number 10 is aging and dying. You'll never change it. Don't get impatient. Don't try to get ahead of God. Death is coming. And aging comes. How many adults look back and think, man, where'd the time go? And it just seemed like yesterday that it was that event. It just seemed like yesterday that you graduated from high school. And it flies by, doesn't it? You know what you can't change? You cannot change aging. And you can't change the fact that you're going to die unless an intervention comes, right? If God intervenes with a rapture, you won't die. But it's coming. You say, well, why is that principle important? Well, a lot of individuals spend a lot of money not to die. I think that's what we saw with COVID. You know what you saw behind a mask in the store? In the eyes, you saw fear. You say, why'd they all believe that? They don't want to die. Most of them don't know where they're going when they die. You got Christ, so you know where you're going. I like what Brother Andrew says. He said, I'm not afraid to die. It's just the process of getting there. That's what I'm not looking forward to. In Psalm 90, he said, there, teach us to number our days. I think that happens as we get older. We look at relationships and we think, that relationship is valuable. I didn't cherish it in the past like I should. And I want to be a little more meaningful in the way that I use that relationship. Does this make sense? Some kind of change. Why? Aging. Aging. You could spend a lot of money and waste your finances if you can't be settled in those 10 areas. And so that's why those principles bleed over into financial areas of our life, of how we spend money, how we save money, and what we do in this life. Now again, it's not just finances. It's relationships too. Because there's somebody that was listening, and if you'll just accept the fact of one of those principles, it'd probably take care of a lot of guilt you got. It'd take care of a lot of problems in the past. A lot of the anguish and the worry. It's just okay. Because that's just, I can't change it. Vance Havner said, the things you're worrying about, he said, if you can change it, then change it and stop worrying. He said, if you can't change it, then stop worrying about it because you can't change it. That sounds real easy, doesn't it? But there's a lot of truth to it. These 10 things I can't change. I can't get rid of them 2 sisters. Man. I'm thankful for them. But how many of you have heard some story of somebody hated somebody? There was a family member or situation. And he thought, man, I wish they'd just get to the place and accept that's what God did for them. All right. There's your 10 unchangeables. Let's all stand. And we'll close in a word of prayer this evening. Brother Hunter, would you pray for us this evening, please?
Lord, come today, ask you with us as we continue this week, Lord. Provide everybody with safety as they go home, as they go to work in the morning, Lord. But I also ask that in the morning, Lord, that they will remember to be content with what they have and what you've given us, Lord. And just want to thank you for letting us gather here again, Lord, and we look forward to seeing you here again on Sunday. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.